start the recording because Kiara is so kind to remind me and admit our next few people. And we will begin. So welcome everybody. It's great to see some new faces here today. And this is our 12th lecture or presentation in the series of the Metaverse and the Future of Work and Play. And Ben has been around learning, understanding the Metaverse for a long time. And he's also come to every single one of these presentations and been such a great supporter and just a visionary. And so we're super excited to see him look backwards so we can look forward with great hope and promise. So Ben, take it away.
Okay, let me try my. Am I okay?
You're looking great.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today with this august group, and I wanted to originally to talk about the various threads that weave together to create the environment that we're dealing with right now in the metaverse domain, and I built some models of threads, but there are so many that it would take hours. So I'm sure you're all patient. Just sit back. We've got 5 hours of material to go through. In doing so, actually, then I decided I would only talk about one thread, evolution, because it will be representative. But at some point, there are so many things that we need to address, because the environment we're talking about is a nexus of many evolutions, not one, and weave together to create powerful transformations. I titled this Under the Rendered and the Real. And by the way, about 15 years ago, I gave a talk at Georgia Tech entitled The Rendered and the Real as well. As we started to get on this path of increasing our ability and capability to render content and align it with real and reality. And certainly we've seen that in the augmented reality and the virtual reality as well. And I want to do so in three sort of phases. One, first, to talk about some core principles to keep in mind as we go forward. And secondly, to talk a little bit about the priors and that historical thread just from the last 30 years or so, because there are elements of our today in those positions in the past that inform. As we've talked about many times, that the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. We know that much of our future exists now. We just don't know where, and we don't know to what extent it will scale as well. And I want to offer some comments in the later part about possibilities and directions going forward. I want to acknowledge what Professor Strickler is doing here is awesome, absolutely awesome. I don't know that there is anyone that could put together the portfolio that she has for your class. If, as a member of this class, you should remark resoundingly, because elements of this will persist with you for many years going forward. And there are insights at all different parts, some excellent presentations. And she only made one mistake, and that was to schedule me for today. So enough about you. Let's talk about me for just a second. One of these challenges that Professor Strickler had was that she could readily be accused of ageism. And so she remedied that problem by grabbing the oldest person she could find that she could put on Zoom to bring forward here, and that's me. And at the same time, she's solving the problem by my advanced age. She's raising the average age by quite a considerable amount, which will help with any ageist accusations against the other portfolio speakers. But I began in the computing field well over 50 years ago, and I was a part of the entry of the first full-time 4-year computer science program in the US, if not in the world, at Purdue University. And since then, I've had the opportunity of a wild journey through the evolution of that technologies and the associated technologies as well, but also meeting the pioneers. So I came in at the end of the age of the raw pioneers, the mountain men types, getting into our city formation and city dwelling eras and evolution going on. So I've had the fortune of doing that. And in so doing, I am the intellectual equivalent of a bag lady. So I've gone all over the scene. I'm not one trick direction, or my research has been in many different areas and many different domains. So I am somewhat scattershot around, and that's why I offer you a shotgun approach with some facts and insights that we've seen along the way in developing in the arena. I had mentioned also that prior that I am sort of a Forrest Gump in that area, because I've encountered throughout all those times some of the luminaries that that have had a strong impact on not only the evolution of the internet per se, but many of the associations of elements that grew out of internetworking technologies as well going forward. So I want to spend a little bit of time on some core principles going that I observe about this space we call a metaverse. And I want to talk about some priors so that we have some perspective on how the past informs the present and may inform the future directions. And then a little bit on possibilities and expectations on it. Any system that we operate is really defined more by its principles of membership, principles of relationships associated with it. We tend in this period with machine learning to over-engage somewhat in the data, and sometimes forgive or excuse the bias that's involved in the data, or lament the fact that there's bias in that data. But if we really want to look at the systems evolving, the ecosystems themselves, we have to look at more than just the observed membership, observed rules and relationships in there as well. And we encounter a variety of natural tensions, that I call them. Among them, chief, are the tension between the world of can and world of should. We need always to mix and challenge ourselves on the limits of what we can do against the limits and expectations of what we should do in an arena. For example, in the world of can, we did an extraordinary job with the internet development itself. And I worked on some of the early stage elements of gateways between the local area networks and the IMPs, the internet message processors. And so it's seamless to you to tap into your local area network and tap into the internet. That was not always so. And I was a part of that bridge area. So we did well on the internet per se. We did poorly on where it might go, where it should go. And we created this, what I call a perverse incentive of advertising, especially in the social media, that has led us astray. And many are afraid that metaverse initiatives will be even more profound and more have a more dystopian impact on society. And so we need to make sure we attend to the world of should as we approach the world of can. And we also know that our toys become tools and that we need to address and monitor and have focus on the elements of play that become the tools of tomorrow. We also know now, and clearly in the last few years, that digital assets open whole new worlds for us. And NFTs are one instance of that. The digital currencies are another element of that. But so many new worlds are just opening up. We're by no means have even a rational thought on the directions of where digital assets might lead us down the road. We need to challenge our assumptions all the time on everything. And because as we move into these rendered realities, they don't observe natural laws. In my second island that I still have in Second Life, I ran out of land, so I built buildings 600 meters up above the island. And I don't have to design things based on physics of the real world in doing so. So a lot of our challenge is making sure when we move from one realm to another that we don't carry assumptions and beliefs that are less relevant in one reality or another. Another principle we have to keep in mind is that complexity doesn't matter. It's a legacy from the 20th century. It's a legacy from the industrial age. You could conceive of 20 years ago having a service like Uber. If you went to talking to a child 20 years ago, you would say, never get in a car with a stranger. Now you might say, take Uber. The nexus of technologies that allow us to tolerate complexity change our possibilities as well. We're in a remix era. It is about stripping things apart and breaking things up and reassembling them in new ways. Information is the only thing I know you can give away and you still have it. When we look at the rendered and the real, atoms, when you give the atoms away, they're gone. When I give information away, that doesn't have to be gone. I may still have it, or I may still have use of it. And so somehow those things that can be given away and still have, I have to create a ownership and dimension. So NFTs reintroduce a restriction on giving something away and still having it, for example. So in some sense, NFTs are a remedy for that condition on information that you may give it away and you still have it. Although against the command right click save, folks might have some complaint about that as well. It's eminently recombinant, so I can remix it. I can take it apart, rip it up, mix it with new things, and create something new from it. So that eminent recombinant nature creates a whole new open marketplace, a whole new way to live as well. We're going to talk more about in a little bit about how we're making the passive active. Things that aren't animate can be animated. Things that can't talk can talk now. And that's opening up a whole new community. And acceleration is far more important than velocity. Most of the pundits, most of the predictions are about velocity, what's changing. And it's very frustrating because what really matters is how the change is changing. If you really want a sense of predicting the future. I loathe the word next. We hear too much of that now because people are taking a standing start. It's an excuse for a short horizon. in prediction and in their future. And so when I hear folks using that, the now and the next, it's all too much about today. And I have to have a sense of a horizon. And I want a sense that those working on today are working for tomorrow, for a tomorrow that has a horizon on it. Metaverse to me is far more a verb than it is a noun. And I sort of lament that we use it all too often as a noun, because it's much more about a metaversing than it is a metaverse itself. And the future is best seen with a running start. When I talk with CEOs and others, anybody that has a standing start, here we are today, what's tomorrow, is going to give you very poor predictions. If you want to see, test somebody out on how well they think about the future, look at how well they understand or think about the past in looking at it as well. What we're dealing with here, as we well know, especially via the NFT community and artificial intelligence, AI and our NFTs are the seeds of the art of the 21st century and poetry of the 21st century. And so more and more, how we're doing what we're doing is becoming that art and poetry in the 21st century. And we're about interleaving and weaving together realities that are mixtures of real and rendered elements. There is no one real, and there are, as we well understand, no one rendered. And so we're dealing with threads that we weave together to create an effective reality for an individual. I also complain about the issue that people in the space, because of the hype and froth, they'll create something as a world environment, a universe, and call it metaverse. A universe is not a metaverse. It may be in a metaverse domain, and even multiverses might be just connected verses rather than necessarily without a meta structure of definition of how one verse relates to another. And that's why our aspiration is towards that omniverse structure where we expect to enter and immerse and be fluid across various domains as well. And one last principle is that we need to lean on the 21st century. Too much of what folks are doing is trying to fix the 20th century, and we need to move well beyond that. Our core objective is reducing the cognitive load. It's certainly a key element of it. If we're going to have immersion, we have to be natural to our cognition of the individual. And so ever more, our challenges are to make the unnatural perceived natural and real to us. If we go back and look at now, spend a little time looking at some historical elements. We are in what I call an age of enchantment. We are spending a lot of time dealing with enchanting things. We have 4 billion people, half the population of the earth, that are reachable via our systems and communication and connectivity, and others that are becoming so, and we hope that to grow. But at the same time, while we have 4 billion people, we've got over 40 billion things that are either connected or connectable, that can sense, that can communicate, they can decide, they can analyze, they can communicate with each other, that are a part of our domain in the IoT, IoE, and M2M, machine-to-machine area. And so I always look to magic, that Harry Potter and other Hermione with a spell, Harry waving a wand, is about shaping nature to our will. So magic is about making something happen that wouldn't happen unless we willed it to happen. And so a lot of what magic is about is seeking our will that we want to shape nature to make something happen for us. And a lot of that now has to do with adding intelligence to things, making things smart, making things that are passive, active in our environments. And so we're able to enable things. And we have concerns, and great concerns. Elon Musk and a variety of others are very concerned about our control mechanisms on this thing we're calling artificial intelligence, and our ability to establish controls and limits. If we couldn't control the internet to service of society, what makes us think this technology that is able to self-generate and self-sustain is going to perceive and retain the values, ethics, and empathy that we expect of humans as well. But if you want to know where something's going, first know where it's been. If we wind up, when I do my teaching on futuring, I start with yesterday's tomorrows, what people of the past thought the futures would be. We could spend a whole good amount of time looking at how people of the past viewed the future. I'll give you, but so as we're looking at how the rendered and the real augment each other and intertwine and interleave to create effective realities, or for individuals, enacted realities, as we call them. One area that I can only speak to some of the things that I was involved in, other than the early internet stages. In 1987, Apple produced a video called The Knowledge Navigator. I invite you to look that up on YouTube and take the challenge on that. How well, I was working with the ATG, Advanced Technology Group at Apple at the time. And it was a marketing group that produced this. Our job was to criticize it. And this was a view in 1987, not of the world of 2010, it was really more 2008. Typically you take 20-year horizons on these things. See how well it was done as to what the world of 2008 would be like from the 1987 period, which was before the World Wide Web. There was the internet, but not other library protocols. But take a look at that sometime. We could spend time talking about what's viable there. At that same time, I was working on something called Cyberface, which was a telepresence and virtual reality element. So if I have a remote head that has cameras that see like eyes, binaural microphones that hear like ears, tether on a 60-foot cable to a head-mounted display with a lens inside that wraps a image around the eyes, as well as binaural earphones that you put in so you hear. So it is like I picked up your head, your two dominant senses, and moved it 60 feet away from you. And here is a video actually from 1989 of my showing this. So you take things like a beach ball, the resolution wasn't great on it. And so for the individual, it's as if their head was taken away from them and moved 60 feet away. And I'm not going to show this to you, but we would do things like virtual bungee jumping, throw the head out the window. You've things like you've never met yourself. You've never come up on behind yourself, you've never seen yourself from behind in reality. So certain things that are unnatural to you, related to you, happen. In 1994, this is an example. Here's shows you what we had as Zoom in 1994. We had we mashed up a video sharing system called See You, See Me with from the Cornell University with a voice over internet protocol system from University of Illinois called Maven. and merged that up. And in essence, we had Zoom in 1994. In this scene that I just happened to snap, here's me representing the Carter Center. And in the lower left-hand corner is C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General of the US. One thing to note is if you look 2 windows down, there's something called the Global Schoolhouse. We had a protocol that we reserved whenever you could only have 8 windows open. We reserved 1 window for a random schoolhouse around the world. So if you had a meeting that wasn't private, you allowed a schoolhouse somewhere in the world to tap in and listen and participate. So in other words, there were kids on Zoom in 1994, equivalent, roughly equivalent to that. A few months later, I probably did the first thesis defense, doctoral thesis defense over the internet. And from my office at Emory, for a young lady in University of Colorado. I was on her committee, and we did a thesis defense over the internet live. And I don't know if that was the first or not, but it gives you a sense of what was doable at that time. And at that time also, we started to see games coming in and gaming environments moving together into virtual world environments. There was something on the West Coast called Imagination that was gaming rooms, casinos, chat rooms that connected together that were sort of a virtual world, sort of a quasi-virtual world called Imagination. There was a Leisure Suit Larry was a game at the time, and that became a very popular. But this is all via dial-up line, by the way. So you're talking about very low bandwidth speeds. Some of you may have been on one of these environments that grew shortly thereafter. Habbo Hotel had millions of kids around the world engaged in activities and gaming and social engagement. And I asked my students, and frankly, I find at least half of them were in Club Penguin at some point. So many of you may have or have older siblings that were in Club Penguin that offer different worlds. So there were different worlds where we had a sense of body, a sense of self that were engaged, social engagement, private digital properties that were a part of it, gamification activities in their challenges, conversation, and so forth. We also had at the time, in the bottom frame is an image from the game Eve, and Atlanta was the US headquarters for the worldwide game Eve. And certainly contemporary to that also is the World of Warcraft growing. And what I would like you to note there is that people were using this to test leadership skills in questing and gaming. So they would look at people's behavior as leaders in quests activities within the game for indications of leadership skills and leadership deficiencies as well. So we started to use virtual worlds in terms of sense of immersion and interaction. You have a growing sense of body and a sense of play in these activities that started to give a sense of more immersive environments. And certainly in Atlanta, we had my friend Chris Klaus had an environment called Caneva that was that had a virtual world component in it that was all contemporary and all humans as a part of it. I was engaged in with Second Life. So in the middle of the 2000s, you have 2003, the beginning of Facebook. Facebook became public, meaning open to anybody, in 2006. Second Life was born the same year in 2003. In 2006, I joined and built an island in Second Life. There were a lot of companies that grew in there. IBM, Toyota, a whole variety of companies set up training centers in virtual worlds. So these were not quest-based gaming, they were pastoral settings and a lot of training activities ongoing. I wish we had time, I'd take you in worlds because my island still exists. I'll explain that in just a minute. But what I want you to think about is even then, we started to raise challenges. How do you mix reality? There was a rejection in Second Life of people that brought our real life into it. So Toyota got griefed, what's called griefing, because they put pictures of cars in their island. And people did not like mixing RL, real life, in with SL, with Second Life. And so one of the things going forward is to look at when we start blending and bleeding and transferring and teleporting across different realities, what are the tolerance for the carriage from other realities? You look also at personal behaviors. You study things like the elevator effect. When you walk into an elevator and only one other person's in the elevator, you don't stand up next to them. You step away from them. Social distancing and COVID, thank you, made that mandatory. But you wouldn't do that. You would consider it rude to stand up next to somebody. Well, in a virtual world, do people keep that behavior? Do they transfer their values into that kind of reality? So we looked also at patterns of trust and brand. And I have a case study on commerce growing in virtual worlds, real commerce in virtual worlds that welcome to see if you wish at some point. But other things like that, politics come into play as well. And here's where you get in the resistance of mix of real reality and virtual reality as well, that had some resistance. I built an island in 2007 in Second Life, and that island still exists. I set up 4 quadrants in there, one for business, one for looking at technology futures, one as a sandbox for the students to build and make things themselves. I held possibly the first class in Second Life in 2008 as well, where it was entirely in the island itself and had all the individuals come in as avatars in that place. I had lunch a number of times with President Carter, who is actually a techno geek and wanted to know about things going on in technology. So I had lunch with him. I had a call one time. President Carter wants to know about virtual worlds. Could you come by and bring your computer and show him virtual world? So I put some signage up, welcome President Carter, and took him in to Second Life. I took him to various islands, ones that I thought were respectable and safe, because there are some that are not. And by doing so, I made my island a landmark. First president in Second Life, our first president in virtual world. And so by so doing that, I stopped paying my rent. And so for 14 years, I've not paid my rent in the Second Life, but the island stays there because I made it a historic spot. I wanted to show you this slide because I made this slide 14 years ago as we started discourse on metaverse standards, as we started to look at the inter-multiverse engagement and transfer of assets and avatars, teleportation between. We started those standards 14 years ago, looking at metaverse terminology. We're certainly in a period now where we expect that things like Google Glass will re-enter, and glasses will be a dominant interface going forward. I interfaced with the Google Glass team, and it wasn't a great experience as well. Here I am wearing the Google Glass, which, as you see, are all right-eyed glasses. And what I told them as I put the thing on is that I happen to be blind in my right eye. So this was totally useless to me. Well, they promised that when the first time they built left eye lenses, that the first two would go to Henry Kissinger and myself. Needless to say, I never got it. They closed shop before that. So I'm hoping on the next round that there'll be some consideration of left eye attention. Those are some spots on the journey. I wanted to talk about where things are going, looking forward as well. Literally at the end of one of our sessions for this class, I hopped over at 5 o'clock to another a SIG. IPNSIG.org, internetplanetary-network.org, SIG.org. And this is Vint Cerf, who is often credited as the father of the internet, as he led the TCP/IP standards development as well. This community is very much engaged in looking at the growth and establishment of an interplanetary internet. And I can tell you at this point, there are, I believe, 11 devices, mostly on Mars, that all carry internet stack protocols now and can extend the internet into space. And so a part of the establishment of standards and protocols that are tolerant of extra atmosphere transfers is something that's growing. And I might put a footnote on that to say that one of the things they're looking at also is interspecies internet and how to get patterns of communication across species in common forms as well. So the horizon on the space internet is to look at, you have a serious conundrums there. I've got to wait for rotation of planets, for store and forward messaging and other things we don't have on Earth that are problems. But as we move into other spaces, we've got to preserve our principles of communication. And so we can set up a horizon for that. Our AI is growing more in the form of policy activities and competing policies and networks as well. And we're dealing with a lot of platform focus right now. This, to me, the interesting part is going to be in mesh and how we get weaves between different worlds, realities, exchanges, and how we get into fire ants, the independent entities that are growing. And some of us are moving here. I'm doing a hologram presentation, and we're starting to see more of this kind of thing grow as well. I expect to see different forms of quantum equivalence and equilibrium that are growing across these worlds too. We won't have time today to talk about the people-centered internet, a whole set of moves, operations in that area. But the intent is to avoid perverse incentives that have led to Facebook behaviors and a few other players too. Anybody who has advertising revenues as over 85% of their revenues is a bad behavior in that domain. We need the canonical forms of anything. If we're going to really talk metaverse, you've got to have canonical forms to deal with transfer of digital assets, avatars, people, characterizations, rules, whatever it might be. The small and the many are going to dominate the large and the few. You're not going to see it's a distributed growth like the internet. It's not going to be one large platform that people are going to hang in. We've got to make sure we challenge assumptions. The smart contracts, which are a key part of our NFTs going forward right now, have a persistent engagement. You're going to hear from Krista Kim in in a few weeks, and she's dealing with this very smart, very creative, very smart, and you're going to see some interesting things that she's done in here as well. But when you look at something like quantum entanglements are truly viable across different realms, where we can have a behavior in one place resonate in another domain. Bottom line is, don't ever grow up. Are there any questions at this point?
Oh, fantastic, Ben. Such an incredible overview of an incredible career so far. So as usual, you may unmute or raise your digital hand or your regular hand and ask a question.
Any comments, questions, or insults? Appreciate it.
No insults, but may I speak, Director Strickland?
Sure, Tracy, go ahead.
Hi. So the implications of gaming being used to assess in character that you mentioned, from the 80s even, I was wondering how much thought was being given to this, like sort of swerving that tech that would maybe assess who a person really is and maybe using it in maybe spiritual, psychological context, not, in the sense of very extremely esoteric like Deepak Chopra, but more like in a helping hand-on way, if anyone could relate to like the idea of a Jan Levinson, somewhere in there where through this game, you discover more about your actual character.
Absolutely, and that's why the dystopian purveyors are deadly afraid that this will create a worse problem than the Facebook thing. This isn't you're throwing out cosmopolitan quizzes or showing age and getting pumping information on it. Or this isn't even, it's more than Google scanning anything that you do and drawing inference from it. I can make judgments on behavior. I have a ability to capture every behavior you do in those realms. And so, yeah, it's very scary in that sense. And we'll have to have some guardrails for governance there, or anonymity, or tolerating anonymity.
Yes, in the direction of Minority Report, rather than using it to help people discover weaknesses and work on them.
It's funny that you mentioned Minority Report, because I was involved with there was a team of 15 folks that were brought together to talk about what the world of 2050 would be like as a means of putting specs down for Minority Report. And so we had a number of the things we did showed up in the movie. I don't like the ending. I thought it was a rough throw, but certainly a lot of elements of that future are in that, and very scary.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's been great listening to you today.
Well, thank you.
Hannah, did you have a question? I saw you come on camera.
Not really now, but
we can hear you. Oh, okay.
Yes, finally.
Finally, we can hear you.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you very much for being able to be here, and finally here we can hear each other. It was a fantastic presentation, and I'm still like digesting the entire information. And I wanted to ask if you can elaborate more a little bit on the quantum thing that you mentioned, that it's coming, because yes.
No, no, thank you. I think that's an excellent question, because obviously we don't even have our toes in the water on that. But while we're dealing with the physics of physical entanglement in remote domains, imagine what we could do early on, even in rendered domains and rendered realities, that I can tie one universe to another universe, like we talk about in parallel universes, that an action in one place may have an immediate sense of response and communication and impact in another domain. So in some sense, we're going to be able to explore the realm of the rendered before we get into some of the aspects of the real.
Thank you.
That is really wild to think about.
Yeah.
That definitely kind of flipped my brain for a second there. We have a written question because there's a live stream going on in her background. So Liberty White asks, you made a statement that you can't really predict unless you look back. Do you mind repeating how we can do that as it relates to predicting what's next for the metaverse?
I'm just saying that it's views that are standing starts. Here we are, what's next, what's forward, typically have very short horizons. You're standing and you have a very short horizon. I find those that are more willing to go back into the past and look at how things evolved, have a momentum in their thought of what acceleration, how the change is changing, as we talked about. Most focus on velocity, what's changing, and one or two technologies changing, or one at a time. We look at these S curves. When you start mixing them together, you get a stronger momentum if you look at how things changed over time, and you get a better sense, you get bolder, you're more bold yourself in raising your horizon in your prediction. Try 20 years out. Everybody says 5 years. Well, 5 years is weenie stuff. A lot of 5 years looks like today and a few things from tomorrow. 20 years is a bolder prediction. So I always start with my yesterdays, tomorrows are looking at 20-year plus horizons.
She said, I like that. Look 20 years out. Sandeep, do you want to ask your question? I feel like you asked it before it even started, but it's still super relevant. Yeah, go ahead.
I can give it a try. I've never tried this before. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It was a question on the comment you made. We succeeded in getting what we wanted, but we did not succeed in preventing what we did not want. And you mentioned Vint Cerf. He's the father of the internet. I do remember his vision. In fact, he was personally responsible in me including TCP/IP in what I was doing as part of the Indian initiative.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I'm asking this question is that I do understand that there is a dystopian reality in the internet today, but I also think that that reality did not start with Facebook. I have evidence from 15 years before Facebook, when internet was being abused for certain things. So
Sure.
what I was trying to ask was, Facebook is horrible to me, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everything is right with Facebook. But what I'm trying to understand is what specifically we didn't want. Because I remember when Vint spoke, in a sentence, he would actually flip the argument because he understood it so deeply. So since you are from the same vintage and company, I was hoping you would say something more specific.
Well, first of all, I meet with Vint probably almost every other week and in different forums. And it is a part of our active discussions, a lamentation that what we set up was what we wanted to set up, which was the open forum for sharing, the environment that allowed the sharing mechanisms. I
Right.
commend a book to you by my former colleague Shoshana Zuboff, called "In the Age of Surveillance Capitalism." And Shoshana was my colleague at Harvard some time ago, and she's written this brilliant book now that lays out the story. And I by no means am I singling out Facebook per se. As I said, it's evidenced in any player who has more than 80% of their revenue from advertising, that it creates a perverse incentive to behave badly. And so I don't single out Facebook, but they're an exemplar of that, but frankly, so is Google, and in many ways too, as well. And Vin would agree with me that we are sort of lamenting if you look up people-centered internet, I'm involved with this group that Vin's involved, the people-centered internet, and a lot of what we're dealing with is disinformation and misinformation issues. And so a part of what we're doing, and it's not just the commerce side of it, of course, but it's dealing with could we have done more to prevent the pattern and layers of disinformation and misinformation? That's sort of the storyline.
Disinformation, misinformation, perverse incentives due to advertising.
Well, perverse incentive creates advertising creates a perverse incentive to collect any information on the behavior, as Tracy was talking about earlier. How do we prevent that kind of thing?
But I don't even think it's working for the industry, because 90% of the ads I see are irrelevant.
I know that, but they're paying. They're paying, and therefore they're getting.
But that's what I'm saying. The money is going out of the economy into somewhere where it's being misused. I mean, it's not being misused.
Raise your hands if you purchased anything from an online advertisement.
Well,
not many. Not many would raise their hands.
Well, I did, and I don't dislike advertising, but I'm thinking that the model that is being used is probably not even helping the economy. So, I mean, I got away from the question.
I understand, but it's amplified. The scary threshold that Tracy was talking about is, with your full immersion, I've captured your behavior. I have a digital twin of your behavior, and therefore my opportunity for mischief grows.
Right. And that was true even in 91. I was noticing things that were being done with SMTP and news groups that were purely manipulative. And those were not happening from the corporate world. They were happening in academic government institutions. So this is not new.
We were less capable then, so we had less harm.
Right.
Now the harm grows.
That's true. There's a lot of money behind it. Thank you. I'll follow up on that book, because that's what.
Yeah, please.
That's one thing that comes with.
It's only 800 pages long.
Don't. It'll probably happen next year. Then
sorry,
I'll have to schedule it next year, but I'll at least find a summary. Thank you.
She writes well. I think you'll like it.
Thank you.
I recommend double speed on audiobook.
Oh, thank you.
So Jim Sin asks.
Hey, Jim.
He asks, what is your take on Atlanta as a metaverse or digital asset hub?
I think it's fantastic, and Jim, you recall when around the time I came down here, and you were down here as well, we were a communications hub. We had the first light fiber ring around. We were dealing with core post-production for movies and television. We were a centerpiece for a lot of that media and communications activities. This is a whole new opportunity. We became Internet Security Center as well. And we have an opportunity now to grow this even more in building a nexus. And islands are archipelagos that need to link up together to create a powerful force and ability.
Yeah, I recall all those things. I recall that Atlanta at one time was a cable center, and that dissipated. At one time, we talked about it as a fintech center, and that's changing. But there's a tremendous amount of knowledge, experience, and investment here in the gaming world, the virtual world. We have a digital infrastructure, and we have a pretty good set of universities that are involved in different aspects of it. The question is, the potential is certainly here, and the creative CMII can be a key player in this. The question is, what will it take to crystallize this to be recognized as a center or a hub for this kind of development today, tomorrow? And I don't look 20 years out, I look 10 years out because I'm older than you.
Well, I think the key is we need a trophy case, and we need to put some trophies in that case. And that those trophies have to start telling a story that invites others to join. I don't think sitting and legislating a community is going to be effective on it. But I do think that there are some trophies that we can attach, and that we have seedlings of those things now, but we haven't woven that story, and we could.
Well said. Now I can go back to sleep.
Ben, it's 5. Do you have time for another question?
Sure, I've got time.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Okay, so I'm gonna ask my question, or just kind of just like I really am intrigued by this incentivizing behavior. You're talking about advertising, but with the decentralized, cryptocurrencies and DAOs and, this consensus mechanisms that is part of blockchain, this like incentivizing behavior can be tweaked very specifically. Like we're seeing this play to earn, and I saw it in great display and in horrible display while I was up in New York. You asked me kind of what
Sure.
my key takeaway was, and I was like, I saw people really incentivized to work together, and then I also saw people really incentivized to grab all the giveaway tokens and then hoard them and then try to sell them for $100,000, and all sorts of behavior like that. And I feel like all of these little incentivizations are like little tests and little experiments to see how we can nudge behavior.
Yeah, and you recall, if I go back in history at as we started in the internet growth and the PC community, recall the obnoxious advertising banner, the pop-ups and things like that. That was the market was perceived associated with attention. You won if you got attention, and so we were attention-based focus. And we evolved and dropped that and moved into influence, and identified influencers, and most of our systems migrated over. So I see that kind of thing as well. You've got a culture and generations who perceive that more likes is better than less likes, for example, and whose goal in life is achievement of likes. And so I think we have to change the nature of those behaviors. We have to tolerate anonymity. Where it's safe, anonymity needs to be a part of the engagement. While we need responsibility and accountability, we also need to tolerate anonymity. And the breaking the back of the abusive behavior is going to be when we can introduce those factors. I also wanted to mention, I don't know if Sasha's here, that we had several people that are in filmmaking others in fashion. And I wanted to mention, if we had time, I would have gone into Second Life and shown you. We did a lot of machinima in there. There at that same time, there were talk shows that were done in Halo 3 in the game, where they, as you know, in that game, everybody's armed. So the talk shows had the people armed in it, but they were filming talk shows in there. They had to have people on the perimeters to make sure nobody Zoom bombed them coming in and doing that. We had fashion shows. Please go on YouTube and look up fashion shows in Second Life. We had the star, Suzanne Vega, for example, is a singer, maybe of the Gen Z folk don't know her, but she frequented our environs and gave concerts all the time. So we had folks doing things like that that today we now think are special. They're not that special, but good heavens, let's make sure we amplify and go beyond those things as well. Too. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Well, Sasha is not here, which is really surprising because he's pretty much a regular. But
well, now that he's cold called, you know.
but I would, if you want to show the, your Second Life, I would be interested. I don't know if you have time to do that, or if your computer is set up to do that now.
Yeah, I don't know that I would.
Okay.
I mean, I could try it. It's up to you folks if you want me to. I haven't geared up to do that, but do you want me to do that? I don't know if people, because it takes a little time to show around.
All right. Well, I mean, we could maybe we could plan another time if you wanted to. I don't know. I'm curious at some point.
Yeah, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to sort of see, because for me, I started at ATDC as a programmer before MindSpring left ATDC and became, on its own. So I go back a ways, but the way that you've laid out all the different sort of ways that we've created these worlds to try to interact with each other and to try to, build virtuality, in the way that you've sort of laid it out in a compact format has been really, really edifying for me. And, as a person who always likes to look forward, it's really great for me to look backwards.
So you knew Mike McQuarrie?
Oh yeah, he was my boss.
Mike's an SOB.
Oh, Mike's an SOB?
He was my student at Harvard.
Wow. Yes, I do. I do know him. Oh, look, we got it.
Yeah, it might be laggy a bit. So I'm here on my island in SimSim. That's called SimSim. The islands are called simulators. So I called mine SimSim. I put up this Christmas tree in 2008. And like most people, it's still up. This is the island there. This is the virtual hatchery where people could demonstrate media. So Pink magazine was coming out at that time and they wanted to show some things. We had a cartooning for peace exhibit at Emory, and so we put cartoons there as well. Oh, I know one thing. Let me make it daylight. Okay. Is that better? Can you see?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this looks better than, so I mean, a lot of people are working with web VR, and
yeah,
this looks way better than most of the things I've been seeing.
And understand the avatars are much better now. This is my avatar from 2007. So this is the sandbox that I had my students build things in. And so these are things that the class has built. Here's the sign that I set up for President Carter when he visited the island. And items be scripted. So for example, there's this spider here, or some of my Halloween exhibits are here. And that spider is programmed to move around. Now I'm getting my internet unstable message. One of the things I'll show you, I don't know if it's visible, is radiosity is huge issue for people getting a sense of, I don't know if the water looks good. The water should look real, like real water. The sky and the clouds should look like real sky. And if you can see my legs, you can see it moving like legs do underwater.
It's remarkably high fidelity for something so
old.
Yeah.
Like myself. And and so I set up these pastoral settings. These are places you can actually sail boats, you can ski, you can skydive, you can do things also you couldn't do on reality. For example, giant snail races. I can fly, of course, too. Easier moving around. I don't have my 3D mouse. There actually is a mice for 3D movement. That
this is beautiful.
And so I have this Japanese garden, a tea room for people to meet. I've got places to meet all over the island.
Wow.
And by the way, the fellow that built the buildings, I paid to do it, nominal amount of money. He builds hotels in real life, but he wanted to build in a place where he could define the physics and of the reality of it. And a lady in Canada did all the gardens, and she liked to do the gardens. The three of us met periodically, but never met in person. So here's my island with the classrooms in it. And I mentioned that because I ran out of space, I built some things up in space. So the students were crowding the sandbox. So I built a sandbox up in space for them.
Wow.
So they could teleport up here and build the stuff and then take it with them.
Wow, really remarkable.
And to show you one more thing, and then I mean, we could go to other islands, but you can go to Paris in 1900, Paris in 1939, Paris, you know, different islands are different times. So this is a virtual reality room. You can go in, and this is a image on the Seine in Paris, and I have different worlds that I could go to. And let me go to space. So I can be in space, or you know, different places, inside, outside, and be in different realities as well. Anyway, I'm not going to take people's time. It's a quarter after now. It's,
yeah. But it's quite remarkable to see that it is so, it's hardly any different than most of the stuff that we're seeing now. You know,
I know.
You know, it's really
that's one of the things that bothers me about the complaints and all this saying, oh, well, that was old cartoony. And then they show me something that looks very cartoony, Roblox and even Minecraft and all that's fine for kids, but it is for kids.
Yeah, very, very fascinating. There are people who make a full living just making avatars for people now that, you know, that do look a little better than that.
The first millionaire, a woman that built islands and sold them to companies, because companies like IBM had 5 or 6 islands. Where she made a millionaire. She was a millionaire building islands like this. I paid probably about $600 total for all that was done for this island. 600 reels in doing it. But that water's flowing and I can make it night. You can make it anything you want. Anyway, oh, by the way, also one last thing is objects are programmable. So I keep a log whenever anybody comes to the island. If they go near a rock or something that I have programmed, like Krista's NFTs, that it keeps a log as to who you are and who came and when they came. I can block anybody from my island as well.
Wow, this is fascinating. And actually, this is a great tee up because all three of our next speakers are going to be world builders.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we're really going to be much more like in the metaverse. I think our next speaker will only speak from the metaverse or, from the virtual world. So that'll be really interesting. And she's going to talk about living in virtual worlds. So this is a great tee up to what's next.
Yeah, we used to have panels in that were all driven. There was a group called SLNN, Second Life Network. So like CNN, there was SLNN, and they did a lot of sports races and things like that. So they put on programming in Second Life.
Yeah, this definitely shows how far we have not come.
This has not changed since 2007. This shows you how old that is.
Well, remarkable. Okay, well, I guess that we should let you go have the rest of your evening and let everybody else go. And this was incredible, Ben. And I just I knew that I was excited about your talk, even though we did have to move it around so many times. I'm so thrilled to have had this. I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch this because it's really amazing how you compacted so much history and looking at the key principles that you said of ecosystems and of principles. That's just been it really helps you look forward at get a better understanding of how to kind of systematize what you're looking at.
Yeah, I only went through some of the VR and some of the AR telepresence side of it. Smart contract side and other threads we could deal with at some other times.
Yeah, I asked them to let me do this series again next semester, but no such luck because I think it would be a whole other thing. But we will be having a Web 3.0 decentralized commerce and NFT Maymester class with Sandy Kond and myself, which will be pretty exciting. So more on that. All right, Ben, thank you. This is
Okay.
incredible. Thank you everybody who came and stayed the extra time. Thank you all for continuing to come, and great to see some of these new faces, Jim, and we will, Andrew, and we'll see you all next Thursday. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.